My name is Catherine and welcome to my channel. Also welcome to the second part of this 3-part series where I kind of share with you my experience of running my first marathon and managing to qualify for both Chicago and Boston during my first attempt. In the first video, I talked everything about the race day, also everything nutrition, the gear that I wore during the race day. And in today's video, I would like to talk about probably the most important topic when it comes to running marathons, and that is the training itself. And in the last video, then I will be just talking about my experience of running the Amsterdam Marathon itself. So everything about the race, about the course, and if I would recommend it or not. But let's get into the subject of today's video, and that is everything about training. I will structure this video into 3 parts. So in the first part, I will share with you all of the guidelines that I use to build my own training plan, because I decided to kind of compile everything that I could find online, everything that I could read up on, and build my own plan to fit my schedule, because I wasn't able to find something that would exactly match my expectations. So that would be the first part of the video. Then we will move into the different types of sessions that I used during my marathon training. And lastly, I will be talking about the different phases of the training block, so the periodization as it is called. So let's start with the first part, and those will be my guidelines. I had 7 rules/guidelines that kind of guided me when I started to create my own training plan. All of this information was compiled from a very good book about marathoning, which I will link down below. And also, from sites like Runner's World, also Marathon Handbook, a lot of stuff that I could find here on YouTube. So from fellow marathoners, from Olympic runners, and then lastly, just kind of looking at the different plans that were offered online for free. And I tried to kind of get the bread and butter from them and, base my plan out of them. So that was kind of the source of information that I will share with you. So the 7 rules are as follows. The first one, I try to never increase my volume week on week by more than 10%. This is, I think, a very good rule to prevent any injuries that would result out of overuse. So increasing your mileage too soon, increasing the intensity too soon. Some people even recommend being more conservative and do just like 5% per week. And I would say that this really depends on kind of your injury profile, like your history with injuries and all of that. The second rule is that my long runs never exceeded 30% of my weekly mileage. This is again to prevent overuse injuries, because especially towards the later parts of the program where you have like very high mileage, you don't want to be ramping up all of those miles into one run, because then you end up, running a marathon as your training run, and that is certainly not something that you want to do. You want to be doing on a regular basis, because it is too taxing on your body and then you don't have enough time to recover. So 30% is kind of the scientific consensus that I was able to find online. Then the third guideline that I followed is the famous 80-20 rule. So I tried to have 80% of my training to be in the easy kind of recovery tempos, and really trying to stay in the zone 2 during this time, and the other 20% to be dedicated entirely to those hard sessions. So any sort of speed work, intervals, hills, and all of that. Fourth rule is that I try to incorporate strength training at least 3 times per week, with increasing running focus towards the later part of the training cycle. And this is mainly due to the fact that it is proven that strength training helps you improve your running economy. And it is also a very good injury prevention, because therefore you have stronger muscles that kind of envelop all of your bones. And because running is a very repetitive motion, you need to have very strong muscles to be able to withhold that. And in terms of that other tidbit about increasing the running focus of the strength trainings as the training progresses, is mainly because of the fact that in the beginning I started with strength sessions that were quite long, so around hour and a half, which is quite long for marathon runners. But I come from a strength training background, so that was why I did this. It was like a good transition for me. But towards the later parts of the training, where I really increased my volume a lot, I had less time to do those strength sessions. So what I tried to do is really streamline it and only do the exercises that were very kind of running focused and focusing really on the muscles that work the hardest and also the muscles that I have the most imbalances in. So this meant that I, for example, lowered the frequency of upper body workouts and I really just focused on lower body. Then the fifth rule was that I gave myself 1 rest day per week. This is not something that I think is kind of overarching rule that applies to everyone or all training plans. Like, this is really just what kind of went well with the volume that I was doing and also with my schedule. And my sixth rule was that every 5th week of the training block, I had a deload week. That meant that I decreased my mileage, my weekly mileage from last week by 30%. And this was again to give my body more time to recover and hopefully to promote like super compensation and allow me to be even more efficient in the next week, and also to get all of the fruit of the hard training that I did the 4 weeks before. Then my last rule that I followed or that I incorporated into my training plan was a 3-week taper. So taper is a period where you decrease your volume, and it is actually proven by different studies that people who taper can shave a couple of minutes out of their marathon time. So it is really an important period to allow your body to rest and to have fresh legs during the race day. I decided to go with the 3-week taper, but this is all again very individual, and some people prefer like shorter tapers, so maybe 2 weeks, some people slightly longer, but from what I could read, like 3 weeks seems to be a sweet spot for a lot of people, so I went with that. So those were all of the 7 kind of guidelines that I followed during creation of my training plan, and let's now pass to the second part of the video, the different types of sessions that I had. So I think that this part of the video is no surprise to anyone who has ever looked up a marathon training plan or anything like that, because it is those sessions that are kind of in every single marathon plan. But still, I want to share it with you. So the first kind of type of sessions that I was doing was the hard session, and this could be anything from hill work, tempo runs, intervals, and strides. And in terms of the intervals, I was really trying to do kind of the longer ones, because from what I read, those are more beneficial for marathon runners. You know, the shorter strides and intervals of like 100 to 400, those are more beneficial for shorter distances. But because during the marathon, you're actually trying to sustain your marathon pace for quite a long time, 3 to 4 hours. For, the elite, just something above like 2 hours. Those 600 and 1,200 meters prepare you better for that. Then the other type of sessions that I used to have is 1 medium long run per week, and these were mainly used towards the second part of my second half of my marathon training, and really this was to support the increasing mileage week on week, because it was the only place where I could actually add those miles without adding it to my long run and exceeding my 30% mileage allocation per week that I mentioned before. Then probably one of the most important sessions during the week was my long run. I usually did it on Saturday. And what I did during these long runs later on in the training block is that I also incorporated some marathon pace miles. This also applies for the medium long runs. So for all the longer runs, I tried to slowly build the amount of time on feet that I was able to sustain the marathon pace for. And the last type of session, which is probably the most frequent one following on the 80-20 rule, is easy recovery runs. So these I always alternated between like harder or longer sessions and those easy recovery runs that would help to increase the blood flow in the muscles and speed up recovery between the harder sessions. So those were all of the sessions. And let's now pass to the third part of this video, and that is periodization of the training itself. If you have never heard the word periodization, it is basically you kind of cutting your training plan into different phases, and in each phase you concentrate on something different. So I had around 24 weeks before marathon when I signed up for it. And 24 weeks is too long to have like a dedicated marathon block, because you then risk like burnout, not only physically, but also mentally. So I said to myself that I'm going to do like a base phase, which is not going to be officially my marathon training blog. This was really aiming just to set me up for success, you know, maintain my base, something that I was doing even before when I prepared for my half marathon. And before coming into the blog, you know, I really wanted it to be this, but then shortly before it was supposed to start, I got an injury during a hiking trip, and that meant that I kind of reshifted the focus of this base building into rehab. So I visited a lot my physio. We were working on the disbalances and kind of just recovering myself and treating that injury. Thankfully it wasn't anything serious, but still, you know, I was out of running for almost a month. So then towards the later part of this 7-week period, I was just trying to get back into the original mileage of around 48 kilometers per week. So this part of the training really included a lot of cross training and a lot of rehab exercises. Now coming into the actual marathon training block. So this training block had 3 different phases. So the first phase was build phase, the second one was peak, and the third one was taper. So talking about the build phase, the main aim of this part of the training was really to build a strong aerobic base and a bit of threshold work. If you don't know what threshold work is, maybe I will do a video later about it, but essentially when you run a marathon, you usually run most of it at kind of your lactate threshold. So it is the kind of point where you are still able to clear lactate out of your muscles. So it's lactic acid that builds up in your muscles, and it causes your muscles to kind of have that burning, painful sensation during running. And you want to avoid, you know, getting towards the point when you are not able to clear it out efficiently. And so when you actually run a lot of sessions at that kind of threshold pace, it enables you to improve your threshold and move it up. Like that is essentially the whole aim, so that you can run faster without that much pain. During this phase, my hard session workouts included usually hill repeats, tempo runs that were slowly increasing in length. So those tempo runs were very similar to threshold runs. From what I was doing, it was basically meaning that I was trying to keep up a higher tempo, so I wasn't staying in the zone 2, I was verging more on that zone 3. Due to my summer vacation that also happened during this period, which was like 3 weeks out of the 7-week cycle, so it really had a big influence, I had to be very flexible in me kind of scheduling the different sessions, because as I was traveling, you know, some days we were in cities where it was quite difficult for me to do a long run or a speed session, so I really needed to just kind of modify so that it suited me the best. But also what was really nice was that this enabled me to do runs in very beautiful cities that I would normally not be able to. So I actually did a run in Paris, you know, going and running for a croissant. Then I also was able to do a run in Strasbourg and also in south of France. So it was really, on one hand, you know, kind of sidetracking kind of the clear path, my structured workouts. But on the other hand, this is what running is about. It's about exploring different places. It's about meeting with people, at least for me. So that was kind of the bulk of the 7-week. And last thing that I forgot to mention is that because this was happening during summer and I was running a lot in south of France where it is really hot, I was actually able to have all of my workouts in quite hot temperatures, which then gave me an advantage when the temperatures went down when I returned home, because my body was used to running in like heat settings, and therefore the runs became easier for me and I was actually able to speed up. So that was the build phase. Now talking about the peak phase, the main aim of this phase for me was to increase my speed and also to prepare my body to sustain the marathon pace for a longer period. So during this phase, I tried to modify some of my workouts. So in terms of the longer runs, like the medium long runs or the long runs that I would do on the weekends, I really started to incorporate those marathon pace miles into them and slowly, you know, increasing the amount that I spend within that marathon pace up to like half marathon time, just to really kind of get me used to mentally and physically to the load that I will be having during the race day. And then in terms of my speed sessions, this was the first time that I actually introduced interval work. So this is where I slowly started to do intervals, and I started with like 600-meter intervals, and I worked my way up to 1,200-meter or 1,200-meter intervals. So that was the peak session, and that kind of culminated in my longest week, which, let me check, was 109 kilometer. So this was the week before I started my taper, and then during the taper I was meant to progressively decrease my load, first by like 20%, then by 40%, and lastly by 60%. But during the first session of my taper, where I had like a 4-kilometer simulation race, where I was trying, to really go all out in terms of my effort, which was a huge mistake, and I would highly not recommend it. My injury actually came back, and I got really scared because the race was approaching, and I didn't want to miss the race and all of that. So what I did from then is that I decreased kind of the intensity of my workouts. I knew that I would be doing it anyway, but I started to cross train. So I did a lot of biking and swimming, and I also started to see my physio again, just to kind of be able to rehab before the race. And she was really able to get me to a place where during the marathon race, I wasn't feeling any sort of pain. So really big, huge applause to my physio for doing this. This was actually the first time that I used like taping. So I had a couple of tapes during my marathon day as well that kind of supported me during the run. And then during the last week, where you have like a very low mileage, the last 3 days before the run, I actually didn't run at all. I know that this generally, it's not something that everyone should follow or should be recommended. Like originally I was planning on doing like some shorter runs, like 6 kilometers, for example, like a shakeout run in like the day before. But because I was traveling to Amsterdam and we were doing a lot of sightseeing in Amsterdam, I felt like all of the walking that we did kind of was a substitution for the shakeout run, which probably it wasn't if we were talking like scientific, but in my head I kind of justified it as that. So that was the last week of my training block, which culminated in the race. And if you want to know everything about the race day, how it kind of happened, you can check out the video that I mentioned in the beginning, where I talk everything about race day. And with that, I will conclude this video. Thank you again for watching. I hope this was helpful, at least for someone, or like a motivation or something. I really just want to share my experience with you as I go along on this running journey. And if you like this video, if this was helpful, please give me a like. And if you would like to follow me along on this journey, I will be very happy if you give me a subscribe down, and also comment down below if you have recommendations for my next training cycle, or if you are planning to start a training cycle, like what are kind of your guidelines that you are following during your training plan, whether you build it yourself or whether you are following something that you bought or found online for free. So thank you again for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye!